Okay, so I hope that it started recording, but hello, my name is Erin Nicole Vedar. This is my final project for ED690, and I'm going to be focused, and my study will be called Going to College, Exploring Self-Esteem and Academic Success in Filipino American Students. So here's my table of contents. We're going to be going over an introduction, kind of a why it matters, a little bit of literature review, the purpose statement and research questions, the methodology I would prefer for my study, and my various references. So one of the biggest issues facing a demographic that's really near and dear to my heart, such as Filipino American students, is academic success, which is what the student wants to do as far as their major or what they want to do in college versus what their parents want them to do in terms of the same guidelines. Something that's kind of lacking in a lot of the literature is a study conducted on students throughout their college career in order to find ways to improve campus climate, mental health, or maybe reform just how Asian American students, or specifically Filipino American students, view college and how to handle it and how to transition into it, as well as their parents and families. A study found by Maramba and defines the institutional climate as issues of race and ethnic diversity, and has found it statistically linked to student engagement, satisfaction, adjustment, persistence, and degree completion, which is also a huge problem. Making sure that students start and finish college, even if they end up having to change their major, which I will discuss later on. Unfortunately, there is a plethora of existing literature that highlights the fact that college students of color often encounter an unwelcoming campus climate due to various reasons, such as race or experience or transition, and many other factors, which I will also be discussing later. The reason this is so near and dear to my heart is as a college student of color, both for undergrad and for graduate school, a dominant discourse I ran into with a lot of my friends, in this picture here, is that there's a lot of parental pressure, especially for Filipinos, for their kid to be a nurse or a doctor or an engineer or one of those occupations that have a good salary or a very solid job industry. And this causes significant stress to students, especially if they find themselves wanting to change their major. I know personally that hasn't happened to me, but to a lot of my friends, they start out in biology or nursing, or they're going to be a doctor or an engineer, and all of a sudden they switch to art and they love it and they're great at it, but it really tears them up to have to tell their parents, or they feel like they're a disappointment, and that really hinders the development of all of these students because they're still doing great things and they're still doing what they love. But it really is a problem. The alternative discourse, like my own mom, are parents who are accepting of the changes that their student wants to make with their academic career, their life, their college experience. So these are pretty important issues to me. And that is why I wanted to do the study. So a little bit of literature on the subject. I can move myself. Nice. So a theme of Asian Americans in higher education. So Samura did this really awesome study where she interviewed a bunch of Asian American students and had them create a photo journal of the everyday life of their college experience. And a common theme that she found was this internal versus external expectations. Students had this whole idea of their college experience of being able to find and create social connections, figuring themselves out, emphasizing that freedom that they have to experiment or do whatever they wanted in college. But their parents would, of course, want their students to behave, prioritize family, come home often, get good grades, and so forth. There was also an article by Buena Vista that named the different factors that often hinder U.S. Filipino students from pursuing or continuing higher education, such as immigration status, socioeconomic status, and race. So these are all issues, good and bad, that face Asian Americans in higher education. As far as self-esteem, for this study, I am defining it as how students feel about themselves. And a study conducted by Lopez and Bui is that international college students, it is acculturation and linguistic factors that contribute to the self-esteem of an international college student that has to study in a different country. So basically, their ability to blend in and the ability to speak the same language, it affects their self-esteem, which is completely understandable. As well as under Faudis, there was this really cool article he wrote on this theory. The interpersonal sources of self-esteem had 4 different categories: self-acceptance, self-assertiveness, goal pursuit, and moral integrity. And these are all things that will contribute to self-esteem in general. But I use much more layman's terms. To continue with more themes, Filipino Americans and identity. Tuason conducted this really cool study where she interviewed 30 Filipino Americans, whether they immigrated from the Philippines to America or if they were Filipinos born in America. It was a qualitative study. It was a lot of interviewing, and I actually based my study off of what they had done because I felt it was very effective in being able to take in their stories and respect their content, but still kind of create quantitative data from it, which I will explain later. But basically, from their interviews and their cross-analysis, they found 4 different Filipino-American ethnic identity definitions. So they found that some Filipino Americans define themselves as being a combination of both cultures, not just one or the other. Some found themselves Filipino at the core, but American by circumstance. So they just happen to be in America, but they are they feel very Filipino. Some feel they are a mediator of the 2 cultures. It is both a gift and a task to be both Filipino and American. And there was also a lot of people who felt confused, conflicted, or in crisis, which is also understandable. It's a really crazy transition to come here or respect your culture here, but still need to fit in and to be successful, which is very important, which leads into Filipino-American values. So some Filipino words that I found some really great articles was pakikisama, which is conceding to the wishes of the collective. So that kind of ties into parental pressure and the need to make your parents happy. Even if it's not what you want to do, you would rather make the whole happy rather than just yourself. There's the difference between hindi ibang tao, which is one of us. So there's that trust, there's that respect that you're one of us and I accept your input, which ties into like Filipino and Asian Americans and mental health, versus ibang tao, which is not one of us. So that unconsciously changes how Filipinos will treat the advice given by professionals, which affects mental health. Also, in a really cool chapter I read of an article, there's this sense of gratitude, or utang na loob, which really affects familial ties because children feel that utang na loob is a debt that you can never repay. For your parents taking care of you, or immigrating to this country, or paying for your college education, we feel the need to really follow through with whatever our parents want because we need to repay them. It's really, really strong values. And there are many Filipino strengths and weaknesses in their values, and they definitely play a role when it comes to self-esteem and academic success, which I feel that a lot of mental health professionals might overlook. Okay, so the purpose of this constructivist research study will be to understand the effects of self-esteem on academic success. Basically, how students feel about themselves, how does that affect their grades, their major, their ability to complete their degree and get to graduation, maybe their want to get to higher education at all if we're coming from a high schooler's perspective. I am focusing on Filipino American students at San Diego State University just because it's pretty much my backyard. And at this stage in the research, I am defining self-esteem as how students self-report on their view of themselves. And the concept of academic success will be how the students feel about their GPA and their major. So it's not all numbers. It's going to be very based off content because all of the numbers don't mean much if the students don't feel genuine about it, in my opinion. Hopefully, this study will answer the research questions of how does self-esteem affect the academic success of Filipino-American students at San Diego State University, and how important is academic success to this population. So the logistics of the methodology, this is a quantitative longitudinal study. So it will be surveys will be completed or surveys will be completed at the beginning, and interviews will be completed at the beginning, middle-ish, and end of their college career. It will be under the constructivist worldview because it's using a lot of like open-ended questions. It's going to be using a sample to create or enforce a theory, things like that. The population will be self-identifying Filipino American students at San Diego State University. The sample will be collected through non-probability purposive sampling, which I'll explain how we'll get that population later. I'm looking for 35 to 45 students just to get a good like handful. And the data collection will start with demographic surveys, just to get all that information, followed by personal one-on-one interviews at the beginning, middle, and end, as I mentioned before. So to outreach to the population, I would want to send out an email to students that identify as Filipino American within the school demographic, and also personally announce to the Filipino and or Asian American based classes and student organizations. Hopefully I can convince teachers to allow it for extra credit. Maybe organizations can give it some sort of incentive, but this will end up being sort of students volunteering and hopefully bringing their friends as well. Surveys will be conducted one-on-one and in person, but if necessary, video interviews are fine, and data will be analyzed using the consensual qualitative research method. Ethically, there will be informational meetings about the study and what it's going to entail, since it is going to be longitudinal and across their whole college career. Must be attended by the participants, and once they have completed and submitted consent forms, then they'll really begin the study. And they can drop out at any time, of course. Limitations is that this sample is only drawn from one university. It would be really cool to get universities from different parts of California or different parts of the country. Hopefully, if this study were to work out, it could inspire more further research in other locations. The population is drawn on a volunteer basis, not a random sample basis, and it is only focusing on Filipino Americans, though I feel this can be tweaked to fit any other ethnicity as well, because I do feel that finding or creating more studies based on specific ethnicities is extremely important. Cool. So the CQR method, it utilizes small samples, open-ended interview questions, and emphasizes the content of the interview, similar to the Toisson study that was conducted. Some example interview questions would revolve around how the student feels about their current academic choices. Do they feel overwhelmed? Do they feel they're making the right choices, like major-wise? How committed are they to their major, and why did they choose it? Kind of seeing if they chose it because of their parents or because they wanted to and they're passionate about it. And to address self-esteem, unless I can find better scales or anything like that, I would sort of try to open-endedly ask them how to describe themselves, what kind of student they are they a hard worker, are they a passionate person, what kind of person are they outside of academics, are they the kind of person that never gives up, do they sometimes feel hopeless, different things like that. And of course, how they feel about their answers, because they're saying it because it sounds impressive, and there's also, do you believe it, and are you genuine about it? And since we're being very content-based, I feel that this will be pretty effective. Similar again to the Toisson study, interviews will be auto-recorded, transcribed, and then analyzed. The CQR analysis prescribes the structure of identifying coding domains, abstracting the core ideas, auditing, and cross-analyzing. So basically, we're going to see what everyone says. We're going to give them their own values. We're going to be able to divide them by categories and core ideas, and we're going to be able to cross-analyze what correlates to what happened more or less or something. So the qualitative has a little bit of quantitative in it. And these are my resources from various different places in the US. And as far as the international references, I chose ones that had very strong either Filipino or just out-of-country influences. So either the head researcher is from out of the country or the study itself was done out of the country. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.